Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm looking at the smallest locomotive that I've ever reviewed. My first OO9 narrow-gauge locomotive was the Festiniog Small England class made by Carto and Pico, and as much as I liked that loco and it ran very nicely, I wasn't that impressed by the model's quality and level of detail. I thought those could have been better for what the model cost. So today I'm looking at my second OO9 narrow-gauge locomotive, except this time it's produced by Bachmann, who is, I would say, a more experienced manufacturer of locomotives, and certainly a more experienced of narrow-gauge locomotives in OO, because they've got quite a range. So the loco is this. It is the Quarry Hunslet 040 tank engine named Alice. And I'm not sure if it's going to come across how absolutely minuscule this loco is, but truly it is. Now in terms of the RRP, this is just over £10 cheaper than the Festiniog Small England at £139.95. Except of course this doesn't have a tender, so I'm going to say that the tender accounts for that £10 price difference, because the Small England's tender was incredibly basic. I wouldn't put any higher value than £10 on that. So that means that for the purposes of this review, I'm going to consider the locomotives themselves as costing about the same as each other. So it will be interesting to see whether the quality and the detail and the standard of this loco is better than the Pico/Carto one. So that should be pretty interesting. Anyway, really looking forward to seeing what this is like. This will be my first ever Bachmann narrow gauge product. I've heard great things about them, but today I'm gonna see for myself. So come with me and let's get started. So I bought this model from Model Railways Direct at a pretty good discount actually. This was £90.96, which is £6.50 less than I paid for the Festiniog Small England. Having said that, obviously that's not cheap for such a tiny loco. Having said that though, when a loco is this tiny, it becomes quite fiddly to give it all the features that a modern steam locomotive model needs. So I don't know whether that's a good price or not. I guess we are going to find out. Anyway, let me show you the end of the box. So the model I've got is 391-050. It is the Quarry Hunslet 040 tank Alice, and it's in the Dinnerwick Quarry Red. And as you can see, this does have a DCC socket on board, unbelievably. It is a 6-pin. So right off the bat, we've got an improvement over the Pico Small England, because that did not have a DCC socket. And the loco itself, I would say, was larger than this as well. So if these guys managed to squeeze a socket into this, then that tells me that Carto could have done that as well. And if you are a DCC user, that makes this model much, much better, doesn't it? It's going to be a lot easier to chip this if it's got a socket. Anyway, let's open this up and let's see what we get inside. Here we go, really looking forward to this one. It looks, through the front of the pack, unbelievable. It really, really does. All right, the sleeves already come off, okay. And here we've got some instructions. So let's have a look at this. It says the Quarry Hunslet owner's information. So first of all, locomotive information. It's got a coreless motor. It does have the 6-pin DCC decoder socket, and there's a recommended decoder there. Running in, that's absolutely fine. Got some accessories here. We've got large buffer blocks or small buffer blocks, so it seems like a choice. That's pretty cool. And it looks as though they're showing you how to fit or possibly exchange the couplings. We've got lamps by the looks of it to fit. That's a really cool feature, and that's not something I believe the Small England came with. More accessories, little toolbox you can put on, fireman's tools. Wow, already a little more impressed by this one. Lubrication, fairly standard, yeah, coupling rods, crank pins, whatever. DCC decoder fitting, access to the loco is something I'm curious about. Looks like 4 screws, so yeah, screws, not clips. Again, that's another massive improvement. And there indeed is the 6-pin socket. And it looks as though we've even got a little flywheel on the motor there. Very, very impressive. Okay, and by the looks of it, that is pretty much it. So let's start by taking a look at those accessories then, and they're taped to the bottom here. So we'll look at those, very well taped on. Okay, So first of all, there are the accessories mentioned. So we've got the various buffer blocks and the little fireman's tools. That is all, though, that toolbox showed is presumably then not applicable to this model because that wasn't included. But yeah, that little tiny shovel is incredible. I love that. And this is a surprise. Look at this. We've got proper and high quality too, etched name and builder's plates. Again, massive upgrade over the Pico this. Nothing like that on that Loco. And here not only have we got the nameplates, but we've also got the builder's plates, and they look incredible. Already, I'm sold on this thing. It just seems to have far more features, far better quality, far more accessories, and no more expensive at that. So with that, let's open this up and take our first look at the finish. Gotta be careful with this one. Oh, just incredible. Look at that. A nice satin finish, not too glossy and garish, but also not too plasticky looking either. And the level of detail and the quality of this model is immediately obvious. That is insane. Okay, I'm going to do this gently. Let's lift this up. Ooh. Oh, you know what? Yeah, this is die cast. So we've got the die cast running plate, we've got the die cast tanks on the top there. That makes this very, very tiny Loco pretty darn heavy. Again, nothing like that on the Kato. This is so much better quality feeling in the hands. And it looks a lot better as well. The quality of the detailing and the metallic parts looks miles, miles better. Wow, this thing is incredible. You know, this doesn't seem expensive anymore for 90 something pounds. I am absolutely chuffed to bits with this, pun fully intended. All right, so a little bit of background on these little Quarry Hunslet 040s, and then I'll give you a much closer look at this gorgeous Loco, and it really is gorgeous, and some of the details that it's got. So the Quarry Hunslet 040 Alice was one of many 040 saddle tank locomotives built by the Hunslet Engine Company for the slate quarries of North Wales. The locos were intended to be lightweight but capable of hauling their cargo reliably even during inclement weather. This example Alice was built in 1902 and was used at the Dinnerwick Slate Quarry in Wales. She was one of countless narrow-gauge steam locomotives to be used at the quarry over the years and was in service there for almost 60 years. In the 1980s, what was left of Alice was purchased by a volunteer from the Barla Lake Railway, and then she was restored, returning to steam in 1994. So there it is, up close and personal for you, the Quarry Hunslet by Bachmann. And honestly, this thing is so incredible that it makes the small England look like an absolute toy. That is not a joke. The standard of this model is so much higher that it completely wipes the floor with that model, to the point where I don't think I would actually buy from that brand again. This is just 1000% improvement over it. So let's jump into this. First of all, like I say, die-cast metal construction. So we've got the metal running plate and the metal tanks up here, which makes this absolutely tiny model pretty heavy for its size, to the point where it doesn't need rubber traction tyres on its wheels. That is fantastic. And the weight really isn't that bad. It's obviously a lot lighter than the Small England because it's a smaller loco and it doesn't have a tender, but it still comes in at 32.5 grams, which compared with the size of my finger really isn't that bad at all. Let's take a look at some of the decoration then. So starting from the bottom, we've got the coupling and connecting rods painted into the red. Slight quality blip here where there's clearly a hair trapped in the paint, but honestly that's the only issue I've noticed. We've got separately fitted cylinder drain cocks which are also painted in the red, and all of this of course matches the body, which is in this beautiful vibrant red colour, complete with lining. As you can see, it's quite a subtle lining actually, but you can notice it when looking up close. And on the side of the cab we've got the builder's plate, which is a beautiful print actually, even though we've got those really high quality etched ones provided. And the same is true of the Alice nameplate. It's perfectly fine as a stand-in, but the etched one is obviously going to look even better. So glad that we've got that included. And then on each end we've got the buffer beams, which are separately painted too, which looks fantastic. Now, my favourite aspect of the decoration are the metal components. A lot of these are not real metal, but they are painted to such a high standard that they look incredible. The finish on those parts, particularly around the cab, is just amazing. Compare that with the Small England, supposedly metal looking parts. Again, it looks like an absolute toy in comparison. And that's another thing to mention, the cab. We've actually got a detailed cab here, loads of separately fitted components, all of them painted to a very, very high standard, and even detail on the gauges. Looking at the Small England led me to believe that this sort of detail was not possible at this scale, and here we see that it absolutely is. So let's jump in and look at some of the actual details then. So we've got these little tiny springs above each of the driving wheels. Those are incredibly well moulded, and the moulding is fantastic all over actually. Look at the smoke box here, it's got some very fine rivets, and it's also got the separately fitted smoke box dart, which has been very, very straightly fitted. I don't know if this is the whistle actually, it might be, but looking at the pipework which connects it to the cab, you can see that that is not plastic, that appears to be real brass. What an incredibly high quality feature. And instead of being made of flimsy plastic that wobbles, we've got straight metal handrails, which looks so much better. And there's also these little brackets, which presumably are to hold the fireman's tools, which are again nicely separately fitted. The chimney here is turned metal, and it's very, very fine actually. A tiny little chimney, but beautifully fitted. And then there's the little cap on top of the saddle tank, which also appears to be a separately fitted piece. Around the other side, we've got the reverser rod as well as another little rod there, again separately fitted incredibly precisely. And then we've got the handrails on the side of the cab, which I think are a part of the moulding, but they look excellent. And then here's a look around the back where you've got the opening doors. Here are the couplings provided, and there were no knuckle coupler alternatives provided with this model, which is going to scupper me because I've only got N-scale rolling stock, but I understand that most OO9 rolling stock has these couplings on it, so that's not a major problem unless you're me who doesn't have any of that rolling stock yet, but hopefully that's going to change at some point. But anyway, there you have it. The quality is just through the roof, really top quality, beautifully assembled. And I've got to say, while the RRP seems a little pricey for this, for what I paid, this was worth every penny. What a quality model. But I don't know really what the mechanism is like. I've got the inkling that it's better than what I've seen before at this scale, but I don't know for sure yet. And of course, I've also not tried this in action yet. So that's what we need to do next. I'll pull the layout up here, and we'll give this beautiful engine its first ever spin. So there she is down onto the track, looking absolutely tiny and also fantastic. I've already filmed the first performance test of this loco and I've already run it in, so I'll show you how that went in just a second. After that, I did my usual disassembly to show the mechanism, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. And I've got to say, mechanically, this thing is terribly impressive. It's basically got every feature that you'd expect to see in a 00 scale locomotive mechanism standard gauge. To say they've managed to fit all of that into a model with this form factor is just insane. So first of all, it's got wiper pickups on the driving wheels. I think this could be the first non-split chassis model that I've seen in N or OO9 scale, and it is interesting to compare the performance of this pickup arrangement versus the split chassis arrangement. Not too sure that I'm sold on this, but it does seem to work okay after running in. The base keeper plate is held on by 3 screws, so it's a good secure fit, and the base is fully removable because it's got spring-loaded contacts, and this means that you've got full access to the pickups so that you can clean them and adjust them as needed. And as an 040 with no tender for backup, this is something that you're going to want to do once in a while once you start to see the performance degrade a little bit. The driving axles have proper separately fitted turned bearings on them. What a quality feature that is. Again, for a loco that's less than the size of my thumb, that is really, really impressive. And it's just driven by a single axle, so it really does use its coupling rods to transmit the motion. In terms of body removal, which you will need to do to chip this, it's screwed together, not clipped. And in fact, everything on this loco is screwed together, not clipped, which is just such a good quality way of doing things. Even the sub-assemblies on the body are screwed together, so it's quality and it's not going to fail and drop to pieces after a few years because the clips have snapped. Really, really good. And the chassis design is absolutely gorgeous, really, really impressive. It's got a coreless motor in here. You can see the worm drive poking out there, which is made of brass, and it's even got a flywheel fitted to it. Yes, the Pico Small England did, but this loco's even smaller, and it's still got a flywheel. Not a substantial one, but it should be enough to make the performance a bit smoother than it otherwise would have been. And yes, it does have the 6-pin decoder socket as well, so it's relatively easy to chip too. Amazing that they were able to cram all of these features into this loco. And then the gauge comes in at 7.3mm back to back on both axles, which seems to be just about in line with other locos. So there you have it, true quality, really, really impressive. And again, the more I see of this loco, the more I'm convinced that it was worth the money. But anyway, let me go back and show you that first performance test. Alright, so the time has finally come to test this, and I'm really curious to see how well this is going to run. Obviously, it's very limited in terms of space for a mechanism, and as an 040, it's very limited in terms of pickups. So it's really going to have to be spot on in order to run well. But is it? Let's see. Let's give it some juice. Yes, it moved, it then stopped. Okay, well, it is on a set of points, to be fair, and it hasn't been running yet, but let's give it a nudge. Oh, oh. Okay. Oh, there we go. It's going. So a little bit of a rocky start, but the instructions did say that it needed running in, and it hasn't done that yet, so I can't judge it yet. But it does seem to be getting a little bit better. I think it's just going to be a case of trying to run it, really. But yeah, that looks okay. It's working, at least. Yeah, already it's getting a lot more reliable. Yeah, stopping on the points a little bit. I'm guessing really you're going to want electrified points for locos like this, particularly 040s, but let's push it off the points like that, and let's give it a little bit of juice at the crawl speed, see if it's possible to crawl with this at the moment. No, it seems to be stalled. Right, it's not stalled now. Let's back it up, see if it can crawl. Yeah, but it stalled immediately. I should also say I've cleaned this track just now, moments ago, so it is nice and clean. So I think really before I can test this properly, I'm going to need to run this in. At the moment though, it does seem quite unreliable. I don't know whether there'd be space in this for any sort of stay alive, but it really seems to need that. But anyway, let's run this in at 50, and then I guess we'll come back and do a more sort of fair performance test in a moment. So here we go, let's go forwards to start with. And yeah, I must say this is really flying along. I mean, compared with the speed of a 00 loco, it's not that fast, but looking at the coupling rods, yeah, they're really flying. But you know, it's a small loco, there's not that much space for loads and loads of reduction gears and such. And when it did do that little tiny bit of crawling before stalling, it did seem as though the mechanism was capable of delivering a nice slow crawl. I think the problem with this is going to be maintaining good continuity with the track. On the points, that's one thing, but it was also doing it on the straights. So hopefully a good warm-up will improve this massively. Hopefully the pickups will work a little bit better after running in, and I'll be able to test this properly. I have to say though, right now, this is the one area where the Pico/Kato Small England performed better. That obviously had a tender, so it's going to be more reliable because it had more pickups. But yeah, in terms of performance, I think Kato or Kato seems to have it for now. Whether that will change with running in, I'm not too sure. So I'll let this run, and then we'll come back in a little while and we'll do some more testing. Alright folks, well that was running in complete, and yeah, it's been fine. It never actually cut out or derailed or anything like that at this speed, and I did do a test across the points, and over those it is absolutely perfect as well. At medium speed, no problem at all. I also tried running this really quite a lot faster over the points, and it was a slightly terrifying experience, but at no point did it actually derail and stop working. And then finally, to be really cruel and nasty to this thing, I decided I would crawl over the points just to see if it would stop, and expecting that it would, I was very surprised when it didn't. So performance over the points is absolutely perfect. However, back when I first tested this, it was obviously very unreliable at the slow speeds, and I'm hoping that having run this in fully will have improved that a little bit. So let's see if that's the case. Let me give it a little bit of juice and we'll see what this can do, hopefully without cutting out this time. So there we go. So it is very slow, but what it's not, ooh, well, it did kind of cut out there, to be fair. But yeah, what it's not is smooth. So it doesn't seem to be able to sustain a smooth speed. So I've actually let go of the controller there. And yeah, it's a little bit on the jerky side. Yeah, it does kind of jerk a little bit. But to say how fast this runs, oh, there we go, as it stalled. It must have just been a motor stall, because when I turned it up, it did better. At that speed though, yeah, that is nice and smooth. And let's be honest, that is probably about the sort of speed you'd want to operate this at. And that's speed 20 out of 100, and yet it does stop on points. So the gearing is a little bit over the top, I would say, for this. But it is smooth at that speed. Let's go down to about 20. Yeah, as you can see, not what you'd call smooth. Seems to fluctuate quite a bit. And in reverse, yeah, same thing is true. Speeds up, slows down. I have to say, the Kato ran better than this. Yeah, this is a little bit on the rough side. It is to be expected, and you know, if it had a tender with more pickups, like I said earlier on, the reliability issues would be solved. In terms of the smoothness, I think it would just have to be geared better in order to achieve a smoother crawl, and I don't know how possible that would be, given the tiny size of this. But yeah, it is pretty quick. Let me run past at 50 again for you. There you go, and yeah, I'd be surprised if the real thing was capable of doing that kind of speed. And of course, that's only half power of this model. I'll run past at full speed for you, but I think it'll be a blur. Yeah, so I think this is something that Kato did better, frankly. It's the only thing that they did better, but yeah, much, much better. All right, so yeah, it's not bad, but I think we've seen better in terms of performance. So in terms of rolling stock, unfortunately, I don't currently have anything that this can haul, which is my fault. Yeah, absolutely, it's not acceptable, and I think I will make sure the next OO9 review I do will be of some rolling stock, and then the loco that I will feature in that review will be this one, so that we can see it hauling. However, we can talk about the torque of the mechanism, so let me give it some juice and turn it up. As you can see, no problem at all in the power of the mechanism there. Loads and loads of torque. It doesn't have traction tyres, which overall I think is a good thing, but that does mean that it has to rely on the loco's weight to haul stuff rather than cheating with the rubber. And that's good news for this loco, because obviously it's mostly made of metal. So because of how small it is, it's not going to be particularly powerful, but a few wagons, you know, a handful of wagons, it's going to be absolutely fine with that. Can't see it struggling too much with those. Unless you're on insulated points. Yeah, that's definitely also not recommended. Electrified points, it's going to be a lot better. Anyway, let me run this again for you. Let's go for a more realistic speed this time, and we'll see how it gets on. So we'll go for about there. On the other line, I've got the Small England locomotive, which I reviewed last time, and I think during its review I didn't go too hard on it, because I didn't know whether it was possible to produce such a tiny loco with better quality features. However, now that I've seen today's loco by Bachmann, an even smaller locomotive with vastly better quality features, I now know that it was possible to make this loco more impressive, and I stand by what I said earlier on about this looking like a toy compared with the Bachmann, and for the same kind of price as well. So the Bachmann, orders of magnitude more impressive in my opinion. But there you have it, running quite nicely, and at this speed noticeably not struggling on the points. That's because it's got a flywheel and the pickups do seem to be nice and reliable. Not convinced that the pickups are better than the split chassis design for N scale. I must say the split chassis locos I've tried at N or OO9 scale do seem to work a lot better than this, but then again, this is the only 040 I've ever tried, all those other engines have had more pickups than this. So I can't really form a definitive conclusion on that at the moment, but it will be interesting to see how other Bachmann locos perform. But yeah, this thing is just incredible. It's become actually one of my favourite locos straight away, which is not something I was expecting. After the Small England, I wasn't feeling that excited about OO9 because I thought, you know, it's not that impressive. I prefer 00 models because they look better and they've got better features. And here we've got a loco that is produced to exactly the same standard as your standard gauge 00 locomotives. Masses of detail, quality mechanism, and an absolute joy to behold on top of that, all for a reasonable price. So yeah, well done Bachmann. Can't wait to see what other Bachmann OO9 models are like. And if you've got any suggestions and also rolling stock suggestions, please do pop those down in the comments for me. And now for some ratings then on Alice, the tiny little Quarry Hunslet. Level of detail I've given 5-star, and this is quite an easy one. Maybe it's a little bit generous because the model doesn't have lights, but honestly I can't see any way that they could have included a flickering firebox effect on this without seriously compromising the model, so I've not knocked it down for that. The detail it does have though is a fantastic finish, beautiful satin finish, thanks to the die-cast metal body for the most part. Also the details, the ones that are supposed to look like metal, really do look like metal. Really high quality finish on this thing. It also came with etched metal nameplates, they're fantastic. Fireman's tools that you can fit if you want, and tons of different separate parts and details. A truly impressive model. Performance is not quite as impressive. I've knocked it down a couple of stars to 3, and that's because down at the slower speeds, while it isn't stalling so much anymore, it's not particularly smooth, fluctuating quite a bit in speed. And over the points it does certainly stop. Not a lot they can do about this because of the tiny wheelbase. Maybe some sort of stay alive could have been incorporated to improve that, but really that's just the nature of the beast. But it does impact the performance a little bit. It's also a very, very fast runner, so you have to turn the controller down quite a lot in order to get realistic speeds out of this, so you can't really use the full spectrum of speeds on your controller. Pulling power, can't really comment on that because it's far too small for me to measure. However, the torque of the mechanism is fantastic, loads of power there, and thanks to the die-cast construction, the weight, given the size of the model, certainly isn't bad either. So yeah, the pulling power is going to be okay, I would say. Mechanism, 5-star. Like I said earlier on, it's got basically every feature that you'd expect to see on a 00 scale loco. So all-wheel pickup, proper bearings on the axle, quality motor with a flywheel, and even a DCC socket. 5-star, fantastic work from Bachmann here. And similarly, the quality is really high. I've given it 4-star. Assembly quality, absolutely top notch. All the parts beautifully straight with not a single blob of glue in sight. Decoration, maximum precision as usual, and of course the die-cast metal construction. It does lose 1-star for that visible hair that's trapped under the paint of the coupling and connecting rods. That really was unfortunate, so I can't give it 5 given that that was there, but otherwise the quality is top notch. Value for money then, I think the full price of £139.95 is quite steep, just because this is a small and light loco. Having said that, the price I paid of £90.96 I think was right on the money. Yeah, it's not cheap, it is a lot of money for such a tiny loco, and I can see some people thinking that that's a rip-off. But when you look closely at this thing, when you see the quality of the construction and the thought that's been put into it, and how realistic it looks given the fantastic paint job, it really can't be said that this is a rip-off. So while it's not a bargain, it's pretty good value, I would say, so 4-star. Overall then, that is 8.41 out of 10. That's a really, really good score, and that's a grade of B. Slightly better performance, and I think this would have been an A quite easily. Into the logbook we go then, and it is 3rd place above the Hornby Q1 and below the Dapple 43XX Mogul. Seems a bit strange to pit it against 00 scale models like this, but of course it is technically 00 scale, so I think it belongs here rather than in the N scale logbook. Well, there you have it then folks, that is my full review on the Bachmann Quarry Hunslet 040 in OO9 scale. What a tremendously impressive locomotive. Possibly the best model that I've run here on this N scale layout of mine, so that includes the N scale locos I've reviewed as well. Not the best performer, that is true, but the quality of the build and the detail just really blows the other stuff out of the water for me. So very, very impressed. I'm now more interested in OO9 than I was, and I'm actually quite excited to try some of the other models as well. So with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did, and I'll catch you again very, very soon for another review. All right, cheers folks, you take care.